ලයිෆ් බොයි ෂැම්පෝ ලොකු බෝතලෙන් වැඩි ඉතිරියක්.
Tonight, reality bites. The fuel hike announced in the early hours of today leaves the public bracing for the resulting ripple effects. No going back. Sri Lanka's debt restructuring ball gets rolling with legal and financial bigwigs named by the government. An empty vessel. The Bar Association takes on the new 21st Amendment draft, labelling it devoid of real change. Taking up the job. With no finance minister announced yet, the cabinet spokesperson says that the president will suffice for now. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Tuesday, the 24th of May, 2022.
Inguru Karadumungu Tulsi Saha Kuruntuwale Hakunen Laochi Ginger Plus.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, you're watching First at 9 with me, David Ebert. Now, the Bar Association of Sri Lanka has issued a response to the draft of the 21st Amendment to the Constitution that was presented to the Cabinet yesterday, accusing the Justice Ministry of having ignored key amendments that were supposed to be included. The BASL points out that despite having presented a list of 13 proposals last month to be considered for inclusion, the 21st Amendment has completely left out provisions of the 19th Amendment that would curtail some key presidential powers. These relate to the ability of the President to retain ministries, functions and subjects, as well as his ability to dissolve Parliament. Following yesterday's Cabinet meeting, the draft is set to be delivered to all party leaders for their comments. Following the presentation of the draft of the 21st Amendment to the Constitution by Justice Minister Vijayadasa Rajapaksa yesterday, the Bar Association of Sri Lanka has sent an official response citing several concerns. On the 23rd of last month, the Bar Association presented a 13-point list of proposals under the title Proposals of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka to Restore Political and Economic Stability in the Country that outlined a list of amendments that they deemed necessary. This included the repealing of the 20th Amendment and replacing it with the 21st Amendment to the Constitution that was to include some very crucial provisions of the 19th Amendment. The BASL's proposals included the re-establishment of the Constitutional Council and the independent commissions as well. However, the draft of the 21st Amendment presented yesterday seems to have failed to incorporate many of the suggested provisions of the 19th Amendment, the BASL says. In its letter addressed to Justice Minister Vijayadasa Rajapaksa, the BASL points out that it remains concerned that whilst the 21st Amendment would restore the provisions of the 19th, such as the Constitutional Council and independent commissions, several vital provisions that were contained in the 19th Amendment have been left out. It explains that while the 19th Amendment prevented the President from assigning subjects or functions, the new 21st Amendment does not include these and paves the way for the President to retain ministries, assign subjects and functions, and also take over the functions of any minister. The statement says that the BASL believes that the 21st Amendment must include provisions removing the executive powers that allow this to happen. Such provisions must be made operative as soon as the draft amendment is passed, the statement read. The BASL also notes that the President's powers to prorogue and dissolve Parliament have been left intact in the 21st Amendment draft, while in the 19th Amendment the President could only dissolve Parliament after 4.5 years following a parliamentary election. The BASL calls for the related 19th Amendment provisions relating to dissolution of Parliament to be restored. In addition, the BASL has also advised the Justice Minister to include provisions for the Monetary Board to be approved by the Constitutional Council and the Central Bank Governor. Further, it also calls for appointments of ministry secretaries, provincial governors and diplomats to be done on the advice of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of Ministers. The Bar Association also calls for presidential pardons to be done according to recommendations of a body established by law and appointed by the President on the recommendation of the Constitutional Council. It also calls for a provision to enhance the financial independence, transparency and accountability of all independent commissions. Further, the BASL has also called for the number of non-parliamentarian members of the Constitutional Council to be increased to 5 from 3 and the number of parliamentarians to be reduced from 7 to 5. In conclusion, the Bar Association urges the government to ensure the early enactment of the 21st Amendment in order to achieve stability in the country as soon as possible. Now, the weekly cabinet briefing was held today under newly appointed cabinet spokesperson Dr. BANDULA GUNAWARDANA and co-spokespersons Minister Kanchana Wijesekara. At the briefing today, Power and Energy Minister Wijesekara told media personnel that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa will be acting as the Finance Minister until a suitable appointment is made. Further, Minister Dr. Gunawardana said that discussions are underway to provide relief to the public affected from rising cost pressures, while the amended budget expected to be presented in the future.
At the cabinet meeting held last evening, a decision was made to appoint Minister of Mass Media, Transport and Highways Dr. BANDULA GUNAWARDANA as the new cabinet spokesperson. A decision was also taken to appoint Ministers Mahinda Amaravira, Kanchana Wijesekara and Manusha Nanayakkara as the cabinet spokespersons. This morning, the weekly cabinet media briefing was held, and during the briefing, the spokespersons were quizzed with regard to the presentation of the 21st Amendment to the Constitution at the last evening's cabinet meeting.
ඊයේ දිනේදී ඉදිරිපත් වෙච්ච කෙටුම්පත පාර්ලිමේන්තුව තුළ ඉන්න සියලුම පක්ෂ නායකවරුන්ට ලබා දීලා මේ සතිය තුලම ඒ පිළිබඳ අදහස් ලබාගෙන ලබන කැබිනට් මණ්ඩල රැස්වීමේදී සඳුදාට ඒ පිළිබඳ සාකච්ඡාව ඇති වෙනවා.
Meanwhile, since last week, parliamentarians were assigned cabinet portfolios in a bid to form a new government and bring about some semblance of political stability. However, the portfolio of finance remains vacant still. This matter was taken up at the briefing.
President and the Prime Minister will decide who will be the next Finance Minister. And right now, the President in his capacity will act as the acting Finance Minister until a new Finance Minister is appointed.
Right now, the members of the public are battling to survive amidst rising living costs and shortages in essential goods and services. What is being expected is to make these essential goods available as some measure of relief to tackle these rising living costs. Discussions are currently underway with regard to finding ways to provide such relief.
මේ සමස්තය ලෙස ඇතිවෙන සියලු මිල පීඩනයන් පිළිබඳ සමහර ප්‍රාග්ධන වියදම් සම්පූර්ණයෙන් නතර කරන්න වෙයි ජනතාවට සහන සලසන්න නම් ඒක ඉදිරියේදී සංශෝධිත අයවැය මගින් ජනතාවට යම් යම් මේ ඇතිවෙන පීඩනයන්ට අවශ්‍ය සහන ගැලපුම් කිරීම සඳහා රජය කටයුතු කරනවා.
Last year, the Ministry of Energy, along with the Petroleum Resources Development Department and a UK-based geographical survey company, carried out mapping in the Mannar Basin ahead of any possible oil and gas exploration. According to former Minister of Energy Udaya Gammanpila, 2 billion barrels of oil and 9 trillion cubic meters of gas have been detected. At the time, Gammanpila also stated that the government could be looking at $133.5 billion through oil and gas if successful. Speaking at the cabinet briefing today, the subject minister Kanchana Wijesekara explained what comes next in this regard.
There have been few studies that have been conducted. Last year as well, there had been observations that had been conducted during Honorable Udaya Gammanpila's times. There have been studies that have been conducted by some aircrafts as well. So they have already mapped the areas. So there, some time ago, one area in the Mannar Basin was given to an Indian company, CANS, to do the exploration, but they did not complete the task. So they have abandoned the project there. But now the Ministry of Energy has plotted the land area for future exploration, so we will have to advertise that. So once that is done, we will submit to the cabinet. That will be done in the next couple of months.
After a long wait, the ball has finally been set rolling on Sri Lanka's debt restructuring process after the cabinet approved the recommendations of the committee appointed to vet international financial and legal advisors. Accordingly, French financial advisory group Lazard will lead the financial negotiations with the island's creditors, while British multinational law firm Clifford Chance LLP will head the legal aspect of the negotiations. After weeks of suspense, Sri Lanka has finally chosen who it will be that represents it during its debt restructuring talks with its international creditors. Debt restructuring talks have been pending cabinet approval for the firms that have been shortlisted by the committee headed by Treasury Secretary Mahinda Sirivadana and Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe. Hence, following last evening's cabinet meetings, the names have now been released. With that, it will be French-based boutique financial advisory group Lazard who will advise the island on the process. In its website, Lazard says it has over the past decade advised on more than 500 restructurings worldwide with an aggregate value of over $1 trillion, including many of the largest and most complex. The company says that it has an extensive knowledge of restructuring strategies with mergers and acquisitions expertise, credit analysis skills, capital markets knowledge, industry expertise and negotiation experience in distressed situations. Further, Sri Lanka's legal advisors will be UK-headquartered multinational law firm Clifford Chance LLP. The firm ranks as one of the top 10 largest law firms in the world, measured both by number of lawyers and revenue. According to information on the company's website, it has also been involved in advising on some of the most important restructuring and insolvency programs across the globe, including Virgin Atlantic Airways, Nordic Aviation Capital, Azuri and Gate Group. According to the Cabinet media briefing today, there were 28 proposals received for international financial advisory services and 23 proposals for international legal advisory services. Meanwhile, according to reports, a group of Sri Lanka's largest sovereign dollar bond holders have hired Rothschild as their financial advisor and legal firm White & Case as their legal advisor. Now, state fuel supplier Ceylon Petroleum Corporation hiked its fuel prices for the fourth time this year in a bid to cover up losses. This time the hike was calculated according to a new fuel price formula adopted by both the state supplier and the Lanka Indian Oil Company. Speaking today, Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijasekara said that fuel price revisions will be implemented either every 2 weeks or monthly based on the necessity. The minister added that the expectation of the hike is to allow the CPC to try and break even.
The Ceylon Petroleum Corporation raised the prices of its petroleum products with effect from 3 a.m. today. With that, a litre of 92-octane petrol was increased by 82 rupees to 420 rupees, while 95-octane petrol saw a 77 rupee hike to a new price of 450 rupees. Auto diesel meanwhile was increased to 400 rupees after it was hiked by 111 rupees. A litre of super diesel will now cost 445 rupees after its price was raised by 116 rupees. According to a report publicized by the subject minister, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation incurred a loss of 83 rupees and 71 cents from a litre of 92-octane petrol and 71 rupees and 4 cents from a litre of 95-octane petrol at previous prices. The report also said that the loss from each litre of auto diesel was 111 rupees and 6 cents, while 115 rupees and 95 cents was lost of every litre of super diesel. With this price hike, the ministry expects to bring about some relief to the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, which is currently one of the largest loss-making entities in the country, and hopes by this move that it could try and break even. The ministry also explained that the hike was based on a fuel price formula that takes into consideration cost factors incurred in the entire fuel supply chain, which has been adopted by the CPC and Lanka Indian Oil Company. Today, LIOC too hiked their prices shortly after CPC announced its new prices.
මිල සංශෝධනය කිරීමේදී කාරණා දෙකක් පමණක් බැහැර කරමින් අපි මේ මිල සංශෝධනය කරා. එකක් තමයි මේකේ කොටස් 6ක් තිබෙනවා මේ මිල සූත්‍රය ඇතුලේ. එකක් තමයි ගොඩබෑමේ පිරිවැය, දෙවෙනි කටයුත්ත බදු පිරිවැය, තුන සැකසීම් පිරිවැය, හතර මෙහෙයුම් හා පරිපාලන පිරිවැය, පස්වෙනි කටයුත්ත ලාභාන්තිකය සහ අය මිල ස්ථායීකරණ අරමුදලට දායකත්වය. ඒ අනුව 5 6 කියන කොටස් දෙක ලාභාන්තිකය සහ මිල ස්ථායීකරණ අරමුදලට දායකත්වය කියන කොටස් දෙක පමණක් නොසලකා හරිමින් අපේ තිබුණු පිරිවැය පමණක් ආවරණය කර ගැනීම සඳහා මේකෙදී විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා ඉදිරි කාලයේදී මේ මිල සූත්‍රය අනුව ලාභාන්තික සහ ස්ථායීකරණ අරමුදලට බැර කිරීම කියන කාරණා දෙක බැහැර කරමින් විශේෂයෙන්ම සති දෙකකට වතාවක් හෝ මාසයකට වරක් ඒ අවශ්‍යතාවය අනුව සංශෝධනය කිරීම සඳහා ඊයේ දවසේ අනුමැතිය ලැබිලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා ලෝක වෙළඳ පොලේ මිල අඩු වෙන විට, ඩොලර් එකේ මිල අඩු වෙන විට, රුපියල ශක්තිමත් වෙන විට මේ මිල සූත්‍රය අනුව ඒ ලැබෙන වාසියත් ජනතාවට ලබා දීම තමයි අපි අරමුණු කරගන්නේ.
Meanwhile, from today, limits introduced on fuel volumes being dispensed at refueling stations per vehicle have also been revised. Accordingly, cars, vans and SUVs will be permitted 10,000 rupees fuel at a time, up from 8,000 rupees. For motorcycles, the limit was increased from 2,000 rupees to 2,500 rupees, while three-wheelers get a 3,000 rupee limit. Further, LIOC too will be following the fuel dispensing limits announced by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. However, unlimited fuel will continue to be available for commercial vehicles at both LIOC and CPC outlets. Meanwhile, yesterday, after the Ceylon Petroleum Dealers Association highlighting how repeat filling by some consumers could strain supplies, Minister Wijasekara promised stern action against anyone involved in such activities.
සමහර තැන්වල නිරීක්ෂණ තියෙනවා විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ නාරාහෙම් පිට තියෙන IOC පිරෝහම ලසල ත්‍රිරෝධ රථ විශාල සංඛ්‍යාවක් පිරෝහමලින් ඉන්ධන ලබාගෙන නැවත වතාවක් ශාලිකා ක්‍රීඩාංගණය පිටිපස්සට ගිහිල්ලා ඒ ඉන්ධන වෙනත් ස්ථානයක එකතු කරගෙන නැවත වතාවක් ඉන්ධන පෝලිමට එකතු වෙන බව නිරීක්ෂණ වෙලා තියෙනවා පොලිසිය කණ්ඩායම් වලට. ඒ නිසා දිගින් දිගටම උන් අත්අඩංගුවට ගැනීමේ කටයුතු අද ඉඳලා ආරම්භ කරන්න උපදෙස් ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා.
In the meantime, the $200 million extended credit facility provided by the State Bank of India for fuel purchases is expected to end this month. Once this happens, a serious issue is expected to crop up on how the country will be able to pay for fuel in the next few months. However, government has also had negotiations with the Export Bank of India to secure another credit facility of $500 million. Today, Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara revealed that the cabinet granted approval to obtain such a facility as a short-term measure.
It's the same facility that was extended earlier, the 500 million extended from Exim Bank, the 200 million extended from SBI Bank, and the new proposed one is also a 500 million credit facility through the Exim Bank of India. So the terms are being discussed right now. So principally they have agreed to offer the credit line to Sri Lanka. So the technical committee meetings are taking place now, but we have requested for a payback period of about 7 years. The last one was a payback period of 1 year.
Now, bus fares will be increased by 19.5% with effect from midnight tonight after taking today's fuel price hike into account. Further, the cost of all transportation services were increased today as a result.
Following the fuel price hikes announced by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and the Lanka Indian Oil Company this morning, transportation suppliers also decided to raise their fares. The National Transport Commission announced today that the fares of the Sri Lanka Transport Board and privately owned buses will be increased by 19.5% with effect from midnight today. With that, the minimum fare will now stand at 32 rupees.
ජාතික ප්‍රතිපත්තිය ලෙස ජාතික ගමනාගමන කොමිෂන් සභාව බස් ගාස්තු සංශෝධනයකට අවස්ථා 350ක් යටතේ අපි බස් ගාස්තු ගණනය කිරීම සිදු කෙරුවා. ඉල්ලීම අපිට විශාල වශයෙන් ලැබුණා බස් ගාස්තු වැඩි කිරීමේ ඉන්ධන මිලට සාපේක්ෂව නම අනිකුත් සාධකත් සැලකිලිට භාජනය කරන්න කියලා. අපි ජනතාව පැත්තෙන් හිතලා ඩීසල් මිල ඉහළ යාම ගැන පමණක් සැලකිලිටගෙන තමයි මේ ගාස්තු වැඩිවීම සිදු කෙරුවේ.
Following the hikes, private bus owners have demanded that the government provide a diesel subsidy for 18,000 buses engaged in providing public transportation. Meanwhile, the All Island Three-Wheeler Drivers and Owners Association has decided to place their minimum fare for the first kilometre at 100 rupees from 90 rupees earlier. The fare have been raised up to 8 rupees from the second kilometre onwards. According to the association, revised three-wheeler fares are effective from 12 p.m. today. Meanwhile, the All Island Container Transport Owners Federation has also decided to increase freight container transportation charges by 35% with effect from midnight today.
ආනයන අපනයන ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨ සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ බහලුම් ප්‍රවාහන රථ හිමිකරුවන්ගේ තිබෙන රථවලින් මේ වෙනකොට අපනයන බහලුම් විශාල ප්‍රමාණයක් තිබෙනවා ප්‍රවාහනය කරගන්න නමුත් ඩීසල් ලබා ගැනීමට දැඩි පිරිවැයක් වැය කරන්න සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙනවා ඒ නිසා අපි අද මධ්‍යම රාත්‍රියේ සිට ආනයන අපනයන බහලුම් ප්‍රවාහන ගාස්තු 35කින් වැඩි කරන්න තීරණය කළා තියෙනවා.
In the meantime, the Restaurant Owners Association has also decided to increase the prices of its food by 10% following the fuel price hikes.
And we'll be back with more local news right after this short break. Do stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. Now, during a meeting with Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Piris today, UN Resident Coordinator in Sri Lanka, Hana Singha Hamdi, has assured her full support towards Sri Lanka's efforts to secure international assistance to see through its economic crisis. She also told the Foreign Minister that the UN is prepared to issue a multi-sectoral appeal in this regard. Minister of Foreign Affairs Professor G.L. Piris met UN Resident Coordinator in Colombo, Hana Singha Hamdi, yesterday to discuss the multiple impacts of the current economic situation in the country, such as supply of essential items, concerns regarding food security and livelihood matters. During their talks, the Foreign Minister briefed her on the steps taken by the government to ensure political and economic stability in the country, including its ongoing negotiations with the IMF and the World Bank. The UN Resident Coordinator assured Foreign Minister Professor Piris the fullest support of the UN to the government in securing international assistance, in addressing the shortages of essential supplies, and also the concerns relating to issues such as unemployment and malnutrition. She also stated that the UN would make a multi-sectoral appeal in this regard. Further, while thanking Foreign Minister Professor Piris for regular engagements and briefings, she also assured that the UN would continue its cooperation with the government of Sri Lanka. Now, Kimali Fernando, the chairperson of the 4 tourism institutions in Sri Lanka, has tendered her letter of resignation today to the Minister of Tourism, Harin Fernando. In her resignation, she highlighted that she expects the newly appointed tourism minister would want to appoint his own chairpersons and board of directors. Sri Lanka Tourism Chairperson Kimali Fernando has tendered her letter of resignation today to newly appointed Minister of Tourism Harin Fernando. In her letter, Fernando highlighted that she expects that the newly appointed Tourism Minister would want to appoint his own chairpersons and a board of directors. As such, she has on this basis resigned as the chairperson of the 4 tourism institutions with immediate effect. In her letter to the minister, Fernando explained that she had accepted the role on an honorary basis for the past 30 months, taking no salary, no vehicle and no allowances, and says that she had paid for her own foreign travel and accommodation. She added that having stepped forward to help the country, she was content that she had cost the taxpayer nothing, and urged this practice to be followed at this time of dire need in the country. She also stated that the tourism industry is not limited to a few Colombo-based associations represented on the tourism board, who have been known to dictate self-benefiting terms to political authorities while risking the future of an entire industry. Fernando also took the opportunity to warn that a handful of industry veterans were acting similar to a cartel in objecting to SME benefits such as the proposed minimum wage, a fair transportation cost for tourism drivers, obstructing the long overdue shift to digital marketing, and promoting only the age-old pre-internet trade show model. She also emphasized that the inability to understand the behavior of the new traveller will continue to be detrimental to Sri Lanka's tourism industry. Meanwhile, Secretary to the Ministry of Public Security, Major General Jagath Alvis, has refuted yesterday's reports that he has tendered his resignation to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Allegations were levelled by Minister Dr. Ramesh Patirana in Parliament last week against IGP C.D. Vikramaratne and Secretary Alvis, where he accused them of facilitating the attacks on anti-government protesters on the 9th of this month. Following this, Major General Jagath Alvis was called to the CID headquarters yesterday to record his statement on the incident. Shortly after, media reports abounded that Major General Jagath Alvis would be stepping down from his position and that his letter of resignation had been tendered to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. However, speaking to the media today, Major General Alvis refuted the reports, stating that he had not tendered his resignation. Having labelled the reports as false, he added that despite this, a new minister may decide to appoint a different secretary to the ministry. Now, the Go-Face Green protest marked its 46th day since the struggle began, with hundreds of people daily making their way to the site of the ongoing protest, echoing the same demands since its inception for the president to step down and the government to resign.
The Go-Face Green protest, launched by the members of the public, continued for the 46th consecutive day with calls for the president and the government to resign. Last night at the site, the sense of unity and fellowship continued to be on display, with food prepared by the demonstrators was distributed among their compatriots. Meanwhile, Dr. S.P. Adhikari, traditional medical practitioner and astrologer from Hokandara, arrived at the site after walking from the ancient Ganevatta Purana Rajamaha Vihara in Hokandara, bearing a traditional parchment containing a list of solutions to the current crisis. In the meantime, CID officers continued to carry out investigations today as well, questioning the protesters on the violent attacks that took place on the 9th of May. Further, the anti-government demonstrations outside temple trees continued today as well.
A special operation conducted by the Sri Lanka Navy in Salli Sampaltivu and Trincomalee last night has led to the apprehension of 67 Sri Lankan nationals attempting to illegally migrate to a foreign country by sea. Naval personnel in coordination with the Nilavali police nabbed 12 male suspects during a search operation mounted in Salli Sampaltivu last night. The group was suspected to be planning an illegal migration attempt via sea routes by members of the public. Concurrently, based on information revealed by the apprehended suspects, Sri Lanka Navy units intercepted a suspicious local multi-day fishing trawler in the seas of Trincomalee. During the search of the fishing vessel, the Navy managed to apprehend 55 individuals aged from between 3 to 53 years of age who were believed to be attempting to illegally migrate. Among the apprehended persons were 45 males, including 5 suspects believed to be human smugglers, 7 females and 3 children. The local multi-day fishing trawler used for the nefarious act was also seized in this operation. Meanwhile, the Navy urges the public to refrain from risking their lives and property embarking on perilous sea voyages and being caught up in the traps set by people smugglers. Welcome back. Now the Export Development Board reports an 11.87% rise in export earnings for the month of April. Despite this being the first time in 10 months that export earnings have dropped below the $1 billion mark, the $915 million US dollars earned last month was still the highest figure in the month of April so far. Earnings from merchandise exports have increased by 11.87% year-on-year to $915.3 million US dollars in April 2022, the highest monthly value recorded for the month of April. This was mainly due to an increase in earnings from the export of apparel and textiles, coconut-based products and rubber-based products. Further, a sizable increase was recorded in the export of electrical and electronic components and in the seafood sector as well. However, this represents the first time in 10 months that the monthly figures have dropped below the $1 billion US dollar mark. Commenting on the development, Export Development Board Chairman Suresh Dimel explained that despite that Sri Lankan merchandise exports surpassed the previous April high of $799 million US dollars achieved in 2021. Commenting further, Dimel also explained that Sri Lanka needs to focus on niche markets while consolidating its market share in the US and the EU, while also focusing on export product diversification to create more billion-dollar industries. He also warned, however, that efficient facilitation of the supply of fuel and energy to local exporters is imperative to keep momentum going, while appealing for an expedited solution to the current crisis. And that's all the news we have for you tonight. We hope you join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.